listening to the 40 Thrive Podcast, the show created for women 40 and beyond, ready to shake things up. And now, your host, Jackie McDougall.
Hey, welcome back to another episode of 40 Thrive. Let me ask you a question. What if the whole concept of quote unquote finding balance isn't actually a load of BS? Hear me out here. There are so many people out there who are like, find work-life balance. It's like this elusive destination that one day you'll just arrive, as opposed to it's an ongoing thing that changes as we do. Our lives change all the time. Our priorities change all the time. Sometimes work takes priority over so many other things. Sometimes it's family stuff you got to deal with. Sometimes it's both. Sometimes things seem easy. Sometimes things seem impossible. But I will tell you this, you can feel better, healthier, more at peace within yourself. I believe it. I have seen it. And on today's episode, we will help you move just a little bit closer to it. My guest today is Cherylanne Skolnicki. She was like so many of us, barely hanging on, trying to be all things to all people. You know what I'm talking about here. Not only did she step back from the chaos, she's really been able to tap into her own, quote, brilliant balance to prioritize herself. You can do that too. You know you can, and we're here to help. I'm going to jump into our conversation, but first I wanted to make sure you're a part of our 40 Thrive community. It's free, it's private, and it lives somewhere you probably already spend a little bit of time, on Facebook. You can find it in the show notes for this episode, as well as any other links we mention at 40thrive.com/episode 104. By the way, be sure you have hit that follow, favorite, subscribe button wherever you're listening to this podcast, because some big things are coming up this summer that I do not want you to miss. Like huge. So subscribe, favorite, follow. Do that now while you're listening. And if you feel like giving us a rating and review, that would be amazing so more people can find 40 Thrive. All right, let's go. My conversation with Cherylanne Skolnicki. Cherylanne, welcome to 40 Thrive.
Thanks for having me.
I am happy to have you here because, number one, I find that the word balance is such an interesting term because it means something different to everyone.
It does.
And so can you break that down? Like, what does balance mean to you?
You bet. And I'm so glad you asked, because I think some people are like, delete, move on, as soon as they hear the word balance.
Exactly.
It's kind of getting a bum rap these days. I think our collective definition of balance is probably outdated. It needs a rebrand, if you will. And it goes back to women our age, the listeners of this podcast were raised in an era where every time we went to a workshop about work-life balance, it had that static image of, you're going to know this one, like the seesaw with the two piles of rocks, right? Am I right? On either side. And they were perfectly arranged like Zen rocks.
Yep.
And that speaks to a level of like, set it and forget it, get it just right, sort of Jenga, perfectly arranged, and then don't touch anything,
right,
because you might upset the apple cart. That's not what my life feels like. That's not what anyone's life feels like. So
I'm so glad you said that, because if you were like, we can all find balance and then we just don't upset it, I'm like, okay, it was great talking with you.
Right. Nice try. Right. When I started toying with what term makes more sense, you can play with all kinds of terms, but this one I kept coming back to. And my visual metaphor is actually Misty Copeland dancing in the ballet. And I think about this vision of just strength and grace. And, there's this dynamic movement to contemporary ballerina dancing. And that's more what my life looks like. I need to land the pose. There may be a lot of twirling and a lot of, staying on my toes, rebalancing as I move through my day. But there are these key moments that matter where I want to drop in and really land that pose. And that's my visual metaphor for balance, is more staying on our toes.
Oh, I love that.
Yes, right? Isn't that feels so much more authentic to the life that I actually am living and to the one that I want to live.
Right.
So there's no chance to set it and forget it in that.
Yeah. Well, and it's constant movement. It's constant growth. It's not, like you were saying, it's not the same balance. I am not a ballerina aficionado or a ballet expert,
Right.
but there's more than one pose.
Yes. Yes.
If we're going to continue.
Yes.
Yeah. So you're absolutely right. And then there's always that dancer, especially when you're kids, who just like F the rest of the people. I'm going to do my own thing.
Yes. Yes. Well, and just to continue the metaphor, like you're dancing with other people. They matter. Their movements affect yours.
Yes.
You have to stay out of their way or connect with them at certain points. So for me, that comes to mind a lot as I'm coaching women and speaking and living and structuring my own life. It's the dynamic component. To me, it's the simply said is like staying on your toes. That's the notion of balance.
I love it. So take us back to when you were living your life. You have 3 kids, same. And when you felt like things were no longer working as they were.
Yes. Well, there have been many times like that. I mean, I think it's, again, this notion of cycling in and out of it. But my crescendo sort of happened. I was working in a very traditional corporate career path, went to a big consumer products company right out of college, got my MBA, kind of kept climbing that ladder, racked up a couple kids along the way. And, I took long maternity leaves. I took 1-year maternity leaves with each of my first 2 children. And around the time that I found out I was expecting my third was when I really made a shift to have a stronger sense of control. I had exhausted all of the flexibility options inside of a corporate environment. And it was just time for me to have a stronger sense of control. So that era of my life, 2 very young children, 3 years apart and a third on the way, was probably the most challenging. And it was challenging because I had lost touch with the fact that I could have more control over my schedule than I was allowing. I wasn't taking great care of myself. I certainly was not sleeping the way that I should have been. And I really wasn't chasing a big dream. I was sort of like in this autopilot, going through life day by day, going through the motions, keeping everybody alive and fed and clothed. But I didn't have that light in my eyes where I was really chasing something. And so that was the era when I realized something probably needed to shift.
I'll be honest, that third kid will throw you over the edge,
Yes.
My sisters with 4 and 5 kids would probably say otherwise, but I think it's the third one.
I know. My youngest daughter spent the night at my parents' last night. Now that everybody's vaccinated, it's like a whole new world, right? So she spent the night at my parents' house. And I was just like in awe of how different the dynamics of our household were, But I that's true no matter how many you have. When you're down one temporarily, you're like, oh, this is.
Yeah, it's a weird dynamic. And so were you still working at that corporate job?
That era, corporate life for me, I had 2 children. I actually had announced my resignation and was in a bit of an extended exit when I found out I was expecting my third.
Okay.
Everything happened at once.
Yeah. It's not like you woke up one day, or maybe you did, and just said, I need balance. I'm going to coach other women how to have balance. Like, what was the journey from corporate job? That must have been really difficult work. Third kid.
Intense.
Yes.
Yeah.
Chaos. Mm-hmm. So what were some of the baby steps, like the little signs along the way that said, oh, I'm onto something here?
I love this question. I've not been asked that question in that way before, and I love it because it is exactly what happened. There is a progression. So when I left my corporate job, I wanted to solve a problem in the world that I had experienced, something where I was like, I have some credibility here, some authority around how to solve this, and that I really see people suffering with, where it's like really going to make a difference in their life.
Yes.
And that was not work-life balance. The first thing I went after was health and wellness. Because I had kind of a long and sordid history with food and body image. And I had gotten to a level set place where I was feeling good and I was eating well and I was cooking well for my family. And I was like, I see so many people struggling with this. Like, this could be a place I could really make a difference.
Right.
So I started there. And of course, I wanted to walk the talk at the highest level. So I got all my own practices in place. And this is where the notion of sleep and eating well and really good hydration, like primarily water, but like just making sure that the mechanism is hydrated, and movement. Those pieces came into equilibrium first. And the beautiful thing, Jackie, was there was this spillover effect. It was like, as soon as I started feeling a little more vibrant, physically, all of a sudden I had energy for other things that had been kind of dragging me down. And I say this to women all the time. If I could go in the Wayback Machine and just get more sleep, during that era in my 20s and 30s, it would have been a whole different ballgame, but I just wasn't. So that was phase one, was really getting my physical health and well-being in order, started teaching other women what I was learning, sharing that with them through a coaching program, teaching them how to cook. And we had a private cooking service, sort of like pre-Blue Apron, where you could put healthy meals on the table.
Oh, so cool.
That was step one. And so it was for me, and it was also the first thing I taught. And then what I learned as I was coaching women in that arena was it was never about the food.
Totally.
I thought it was about, but it wasn't. It was about something else that was out of whack, that was sort of manifesting through the food. And one thing led to another, where ultimately the principles within Brilliant Balance, the work I do today, were sort of extracted from those early clients as women who were sharing, what did they really want?
Right.
What was on the other side of their relationship with food?
Yeah, I think that you just nailed it. There are so many symptoms that we see online that other people are trying to treat, quote unquote, treat or support or coach through. But the symptom is not the problem. It's whatever is underlying there. I love that you not only noticed that in your clients, but then started to shift your work based on what you were seeing. And there are so many online businesses. I believe that we all have, at this age, we all have experience that we could absolutely be teaching to others. But if we just try to do the same thing day in and day out without evolving and growing through the process, then I think you're not going to be successful. And that's when you hear people like, oh, I tried it. It doesn't work for me.
Yes.
I like that evolution for you, because you got to evolve as a person as you saw others evolve as people.
That's right. And I think I learned a lot in that early chapter of entrepreneurship that, I'm a creative at heart. I don't think I would have owned that moniker early on. My team would laugh hysterically to hear me say that, because I am an idea a minute now.
Yeah.
Business to me today is a creative outlet. It's this opportunity for me to just create new things and put them out to people where they can be of service over and over again. So that evolution, had I just stayed within that initial incarnation of the business, I would have been bored completely. And it would have stopped being life-filled for the people that I was serving, right? So there's this energy match of like, I'm learning and growing and I'm pulling you along that journey with me. Still talk plenty about physical health and well-being, because it is the starting point, right? It's the inception of anyone's journey toward balance. If you are not well rested and you are not in touch with your physical self, you will never feel that you have balance, because you're just trying to stay alive. Right. And everything else is too hard.
Yeah. What do you say to the resistance, right? Because we all know that woman and she's like, I can't go to sleep. I have this, like as if her life is so much busier than the rest of ours, and like all the reasons in the world that she can't drink more water or get more sleep. How do you deal with resistance? Because I know you probably see that
every day. Yeah. Yes. Well,
we all think we're so special, don't we?
I know. I call it the special snowflake problem. I am so practical about this, right? We all have stories. I have stories about why I struggle to meditate. People have stories about why they can't work out. And I'm very practical about this. Here's the bottom line. We all have the same 24 hours in a day, period. Okay.
Yeah.
Some of us have figured out how to say 8 of them are reserved for sleep. It's non-negotiable.
Right.
All of us have said that, you have to get some sleep. There's no one here who's staying up 24 hours a day. So we all have a number somewhere that's non-negotiable. But if we make that number 8 or 7 or whatever it is, it's like a forcing function. It forces us to make choices about what goes into the waking 16 hours, right? So think practically about that. If you say, well, I just can't, if somebody says, I just can't get 8 hours of sleep, all they're saying is, I want more waking hours every day. And I'm really struggling to make choices about what's in and what's out. And because I'm letting people down, or I feel like I don't have enough leisure time, or I'm not able to spend time with my friends, or I can't watch Netflix, I have to stay up longer in order to do those things. Or I have so much work, right? I have to stay up longer to do those things. At the end of the day, it's a choices function. So when sleep becomes non-negotiable, you start making better choices about how you're really going to spend the hours, because there is a true limiter then, right? So too with exercise or reading more or whatever it is you want to do. If your excuse in your head is, I don't have time, The question is, where is the time going that you value more, right?
Yes.
We have to honor that.
Yeah.
We have to honor the truth of that. And look, there's things I'm not doing because I value other things more. But when you're intentional,
Yeah.
then you can feel like you have balance, right? Because I think balance really means, do I feel like I have some discretion over where my time goes? Give me any woman on the planet. If she has discretion over where her time goes, she feels fine.
Right.
The problem is when we get out of agency and we're like, it's not, I can't.
Right.
What choice do I have? Right then, we feel yucky.
And owning your choices too, right? So it's kind of two things. Number one, it's not a time problem, it's a priority problem. And number two, some people don't find reading to be relaxing or part of their personal development journey or whatever. It's okay to say, I don't really love to read. That's another thing, right? We're constantly trying to compare ourselves with each other. Like, wait, you read 5 books a month? I don't have time for that. It's like, yes, you do. It's just not in that priority scale. It doesn't rank high.
That's right. How many people are in touch with where their time is going? The answer is not very many.
Yeah.
Like not very many of us are good sort of historians at really being able to account for where our time is going. So that's a really practical exercise. We do it with clients early on is get a handle on where is your time going? And then like, are you happy about that?
Yeah. We do it with money and we do it with food.
100%.
Yeah. So do it with time. That's a great exercise. Oftentimes as women, we don't necessarily ask for help until the scales have tipped so far that we don't know what else to do. So I have a feeling, correct me if I'm wrong, that many women who come to you are at the end of their wits. What are some of the issues that are happening that they're coming to you for? Like what has to give for them finally to say, Cherylanne, help me?
I love to catch them earlier than that when I can, right?
Are you able to?
Sometimes. And I think the key is there are a few problems that people might be wrestling with when they intersect with my work. And when that problem in and of itself gets big enough, or when they have enough of them stacked on top of each other, that's when they're ready to move from complaining about the situation to solving it, right? The first thing that has to happen, Jackie, is they have to believe it's solvable. So I think a lot of women go, this just isn't solvable. It is what it is.
Yes.
Right? Everybody has this problem. I remember being in my 20s when I was in the depths of all my jacked up eating behaviors and body image problems, telling my friend, like, this is how every woman feels, right? This is just normal. Of course, this is how I feel. Everybody does this. Everyone feels this way. And she was like, no, and I'm forever grateful to her for saying that. The truth is a lot of women, right, struggle with food and body image, just like a lot of women struggle with work-life balance, but it doesn't have to be that way. It doesn't have to be the end of the road. So if I can catch someone where they get that glimpse, that glimmer of hope, that maybe I can do this. Maybe I just was never taught tools that would help me do this, right?
Right.
And maybe I can move out of complaining into solving. Like that's the key. So those couple of problems are, one, I'm really, really tired. If somebody is really tired and they're struggling to like manage their energy well and have enough energy to live their life and feel kind of vibrant and positive, that's one place where we sometimes intersect. The second would be, I'm struggling to manage my time. This is I have too much to do and not enough time to do it.
Right.
I'm not productive enough. I can't fit it all in. And those things obviously relate to each other because then we start staying up late. So that overwhelm or too much to do is a big one. The third one would be, is this all there is? I thought there has to be more than this. I thought it was going to feel different. It's kind of that midlife crisis, midlife pivot moment where you're just arriving at a place where you're like, I got so busy doing, I kind of didn't assess how it felt. And this is not how I thought it was going to feel. I have the money, I have the house, I have the job, I have the family, but is this all there is? That's really fun territory to work with women in around purpose and possibilities. And then the fourth one would be like, I'm in the wrong career. I feel like my work-life balance is crap because I'm not in the right work. I don't like the work. I don't want to go there. I don't like the projects on my plate. I don't like the people I'm working with. So those 4 things are probably how you get to our front door. One or more of them could be at play.
Right. That's such a good point too, because if you're doing work that you love, you don't necessarily feel like I could do this all day, every day.
Me
and I
too.
do, and create and connect with women. And it can be exhausting at times because there's a lot of work, but it's work that I love. So my big challenge is to stop doing it at specific hours and really give to my family or to my friends or to something else so that it doesn't become overwhelming. Because when you enjoy it, that's sometimes a challenge. I know,
You bet.
like quality problem, right? I mean, I like my work so much that I don't have any balance.
Yeah, right. And I think that's a little subset of people who are in, you would still say, I may not have work-life balance, but you recognize and honor that it's a choice.
Yes.
It's like, it's almost an addiction. It's tempting to work all the time because it's play.
Right.
We are not in the most common camp. I'll tell you that.
Right. But at the same time, it's play until it's not, because exhaustion is exhaustion.
Right.
And then you're not giving your most, or you're trying to keep up, and then it becomes kind of a burden. But I'm sure you've worked with people who go to jobs and punch the time card and not feel good about that work. Yeah. And so then they have to reassess the kind of work that they're actually doing.
Yeah. You know what the hardest is? The hardest is the people who are in what I call Goldilocks jobs. It's like, it's not too hot. It's not too cold. Like I could kind of hang out here.
Yeah.
It's porridgey because there's great benefits, or there's
it's porridgey,
or there's great pay, or, there's something about
they're
it.
existing in a good space.
So it's not painful enough to feel like that real push to make a change. Like we as humans don't like change, right? We seek help, or we make change, to your point, when things are pretty dire. And so when I said I love to intersect with people sooner, it's like, if we can turn the light on when they're still in that state, that's actually a great platform to make a change from, because you don't have the time pressure of like, I just got laid off, or I don't have a job at all. You have a little bit of time to think,
right,
and to work through some of these questions, and to really assess, what do you want and how do you steer in that direction? So that's awesome when I can meet people in that place.
Yeah. And so is it all women that you work with?
I do.
Okay. So you have these women come into your programs. What are some of the results? How do they look at life after working with you? Tell us the happy stories.
Yes, the happy stories. Well, everyone has a unique journey, right? For where do they want to end up? So we ask women, like, what are the areas of your life that are not working the way you want them to? And what would success look like? What is your vision? What is your dream in that area of your life? And so we have people pick up to 3, and then we really help them reverse engineer how to make that dream their reality. Right? How do you turn the dream into a plan? What's the transformation process? And then we actually work through the implementation of that as well. It's not just like, oh, here's your plan, good luck. Like we'll work with the implementation. So you get people like, we have someone who was working as a veterinarian, an emergency room veterinarian. And so really long overnight shifts, kind of this exhausting, draining work, who really still wanted to be a vet, but really couldn't see her way out of this particular incarnation of that career, right? And when you're a doctor or an attorney, and you've invested that much in your education and your experience, it's hard to pivot, right? So in her case, she's working now in a much smaller private practice. She's like newly landed in there. She has a great package that she's put together to be there. And it's just delightful to see her like fully awake, when you're interacting with her, because professionally, that's the launching pad now to having the other things in her life that she wants falling into place.
Right.
I'm thinking about a woman who came in working in a corporate job and really wanted to do nonprofit work, which is something we hear a lot.
Yes.
Because a lot of people connect nonprofit work with purpose sort of instinctively. And she just didn't think it was possible. And her disdain for her corporate life was affecting everything else, her marriage, her relationship with her kids, her health. It's like this downward spiral. And by asking good questions, you can kind of get to what's at the root. And in her case, it was the work. And it's amazing. I mean, she is a vice president with Sandy Hook Promise now.
Oh, wow.
Big gun violence nonprofit. That move happened inside of 6 weeks, probably, of starting the work, because as soon as you start looking and activating and having some support and courage, like things move, and then of course there's that positive domino effect of, you make that shift and all the pieces sort of fall into place around it.
Absolutely.
I could tell stories all day, but they're
well, I love that, because a lot of people will just sit in whatever it is that they think that they can't do. And so if you're listening and you're like, I have to hire Cherylanne, go do it. But even like reaching out to somebody, your neighbor, your sister, your cousin, someone in the 40 Thrive group, just tell somebody your dream.
Call your shot.
Because you might be surprised. Yeah, call your shot. I love that. You might be surprised that that person knows someone who can help you, or it's not as difficult. When we sit with something and we believe that we're the only one who can't actually move forward, you'd be surprised at how untrue that is.
100%. And you're right that calling your shot publicly is an activation mechanism. Like you start the wheels up, kind of forward momentum as soon as you name what you want. And that accountability and support really matters. Whoever it's coming from, they need to be someone who doesn't just tell you, oh, you're fine. It's fine. Everybody feels this way. And that's often what our friends and family, they're very well-meaning, but they are trying to keep us comfortable. And so you want to make sure whoever you're picking, that they're able to agitate you just enough that you take the action that you're probably a little afraid to take.
Yeah. And let's be honest, they're also very motivated to keep themselves comfortable.
Yes. Yes. Because if you change, right, what will happen? Will they get left behind?
Exactly. Will you not have time? Will you, have some other passion? And so many reasons.
Yeah.
What are some, like, especially with work and home and all of that, like, what are some tips you can provide someone who's listening, who's like, okay, water check, sleep check, moving my body check, eating well.
Yes.
But work is still chaotic and I still have 3 kids. Yeah. And a lot of people have become homeschoolers when they never intended to. There's a lot going on. So what are some other tips?
I think if your energy management is solid, if you feel like you've already got good practices in place to take care of your physical, mental, emotional kind of health and well-being, then you would earn the right to move on to productivity practices.
Yes.
So the next kind of tip, if you will, is having a plan for your week. We spend so much time just flying by the seat of our pants. And because of that,
get out of my head, girl, get out of my head.
There's this like constant anxiety about, is there something I've forgotten to do? Mm-hmm. Am I going to get it all done? Do I have enough time? Right. And so we can't, like, sometimes I say, make peace with the undone, right? We don't know how to make peace with the undone because we have no idea if we have enough time to get the things on our plate finished. So having a plan for your week that assigns some time estimates or actually schedules the things you intend to do is such a mechanism for feeling a sense of control and feeling a sense of predictability. Like anything we can do to return a sense of predictability and control to life, the better we're going to feel. And so that's my best mechanism for it, is like, it doesn't matter if it's a sheet of notebook paper or a digital calendar, or I do not care. Just think about the chronology of your week and where you're going to be and what you're going to be doing, right? Proactively. And then at the end of that week, take a look back and see, how did I do? Did I do the things when I said I was going to do them? Did everything get bumped out of the way because somebody else's priorities became more important than my own? Like, what happened, right? Do the postmortem and then repeat, do it again. You will get better week by week at this. And I will tell you, I finished my weekly plan on Friday afternoons. So I can tell you right now kind of how next week's going to unfold. What are the projects? When am I working on them? What are the things at home? And that piece is what lets me like pour a glass of wine tonight and not worry about, am I going to get it all done?
Right.
Right. Because I already know, I already have a framework for where it's going. So that is the next real freedom provider, because it drives choices. If I look at that and go, oh, it's not going to fit, I'm going to start canceling stuff. I'm going to start rescheduling so that I already know now, like, oh, I'll feel better as I move through that week.
That's perfect. I love that. I do a Sunday brain dump. You could see my notebook. And then I start plotting. I actually start prioritizing and plotting on the calendar what actually has to happen, because just because it was dumped out of my brain doesn't mean it's a priority. We think everything that we can think of is actually a priority.
Yeah. And, and it's not all a priority right now. Like I have a 16-year-old daughter, and it's something I'm really trying to work with her on, is just because the assignment was given doesn't mean you have to do it right this second. What does it look like to schedule how that assignment's going to unpack before the due date? So you're not feeling that anxiety of like, I have to do it right this second, or what? Like that, again, the piece with the undone, but we're all like that. We think all of our tasks have to be done right this minute. And you can get as much peace from scheduling it 2 months from now and knowing that's when it's going to happen as you can get from actually checking it off your list.
Okay, that's a great point, because what you just said is so key. Scheduling it 2 months from now, not waiting 2 months out of default.
That's right.
Where 2 months from now it's going to stress you out, but it's actually on the schedule for then. And so that's when you're planning to do it, is very different from I've put it off for 2 months and now I have to get it done.
You got it.
You got it. And I was listening to something recently too, talking about our natural tendencies, right? Like there are people who berate themselves, myself included, for procrastinating, right? But we also have to be aware of how we work best. And so you may not be someone who works best. Let me take Christmas shopping, for example. Okay.
Yes.
If I start Christmas shopping in November, I will spend twice as much money on Christmas, because I enjoy, unlike a lot of people, but I enjoy the process of buying gifts for people. And so if I start in November, you, Cherylanne, are going to get 3 gifts instead of 1 because I love the idea of getting something for someone that they might enjoy.
Sure.
And so I actually do try to shift it at least after Thanksgiving, if not even later into December, because I know I'll still find all the things I need, but I won't overspend as much, because that's just how it works. And so I'm okay with that.
You're using a form of time boxing. Like you're saying, this is how much time I will allot to this task. And you've got your reasons for that. It works for anything. If I say, I'm going to write a speech, I have a keynote coming up and I'm going to write it. If I don't schedule it, it might take me 8 hours. If I say, these are the 2 hours in which you're going to craft that talk, I'm probably going to get it done.
Oh, that's awesome.
Like there's something magical about that boxing in of saying, I've allocated the time, and guess what? There's something waiting right on the heels of that. So I can't really get in my own way as much. It's core to the productivity plan. It's really core to work-life balance, because you also want to say, like, I'm having dinner with my family at 6. And that's happening, which means everything before that has to get done on time so that you can get to that dinner with your family, right?
Right. Yeah, I love that. Another challenge that I assume that you have seen, or maybe you've seen this, delegating, right? We all have this, like, I can do it myself. If it's going to get right, it has to be done by me, and all of those insert BS words.
Control. We like control a whole bunch.
We really do. So how do you deal with that when someone feels like they can't give tasks to other people?
Yeah, most people do not like it. We are not great at giving up the control over the outcome to someone else. You reach a point where you learn that there are really only 3 ways to get time back in your life for things you want, right? 1 is don't do it at all. Nobody's doing it. It's just not going to get done. 2 is get someone else to do it, delegate or outsource. And the 3rd is do it more efficiently. Find a better process, build a better mousetrap. If it doesn't fit into one of those 3 buckets, you're not getting any time back. Okay. You're stuck. That's how you get people to delegate or outsource. Because they realize my other choices are, I have to do this myself more efficiently, or it's not going to get done at all.
Right.
And when those become like unattractive, that middle option becomes really attractive. So this is where we start teaching and training people to do work, or we start saying, I'm not uniquely qualified to do that. I may be the best qualified to do that, but not uniquely qualified. And then we start learning the edges of delegating and outsourcing. So I kind of have this classic example of my husband and I have arrived at what we call the 80-20 rule. It's a little bit of a riff on the 80-20 rule.
Yep.
And it's that he can do about 80% of any task in our house to my standard. Okay. Like it's okay to laugh at that. He's totally on board with me telling this story, but pick the task, do the dishes, clean up the kitchen, make the bed, whatever. He gets it about 80% of the way to my finish line.
Right.
I am so happy to pick up that last 20% and like polish the spots off the faucet on the kitchen or fluff the pillows on the bed, which he is never going to do. Like 0% of the time, he won't even entertain the idea. So the kids are like that. The kids are another kind of iteration of, they can get about 80% of my standard. When I'm saying my standard, I mean how I would do it if I were doing it myself. But guess what? That's 80% of the time.
Right.
So you can look at delegating and outsourcing even at work. Like, can somebody get it partway there? Can they get a draft done and you'll clean it up? Can they look at options for hotels and you'll pick the actual hotel? Like, wrestle with your own kind of need for control. But there are often pieces of those projects that someone can do. And if you want to do the last 20%, knock yourself out.
Yeah, that is perfect. I love that because you may spend some time doing that last 20%, or you can spend that same time complaining that they didn't get to 100%. But guess what? If you choose to do the 20%, then it's done, you know?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
I think sometimes sometimes I spend too much time complaining that things didn't happen the way I would want them to happen.
Yeah.
Instead of just picking up the ball for the last, few yards.
Yes,
So,
exactly.
Thank you for changing my mindset on that.
Little reframe for you today.
I love a good reframe. Well, I could talk to you all day. You have some really, really great tips. So my audience, over 40, there are women who are doing a variety of things, trying to level up their lives. Like, what do you have for them that they could reach out to you for?
There are actually 3 choices. And the best thing to do is probably send them just straight to brilliant-balance.com. If you go there and sort of scroll down the homepage, there are a few different options. One is like a checklist for how to stop feeling so tired all the time, like these tips around energy management.
I love a checklist.
It's so good. And they're really truly very practical, my best ideas. One is around calendar control. So for anybody who's struggling with that middle suite of I really just do not know how to manage my calendar, it's kind of the next level to what I shared with you today. And then the third one would be how to assess if you're ready for a career change. Like if you're really, really ready to do something different, there is a great free download on that as well. So they can pick whichever one, makes sense to them if they just go to the homepage of the site.
Yeah. Or all 3 of them if you need it. I'm just saying.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Cherylanne. I love what you're doing. And I love the idea that we don't have to be spinning all the time. I'm about to turn 50 and I don't want to hustle anymore. I want to be very intentional with my work and align it with who I want to be. And the hustle does not fit into that. And so I love the work you're doing.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for listening. We keep the conversation going in our free and private Facebook group. So make sure you join us over there. Also, if you have any questions, comments, wishes, hopes, dreams of something you'd like to hear on 40 Thrive, send us an email at hello@40thrive.com. Until next time, take care and keep thriving. Spring has sprung, and with the change of seasons, sometimes comes an increase in vitality. If you're feeling in the mood for a little more personal time, may I suggest Coconut. Coconut is all about providing clean and natural ingredients when you're enjoying your most intimate moments, with or without a partner. Naturally safe products developed by people who are obsessed with quality. Get 15% off with promo code GROWNASS at grownasswoman.guide/Coconut. That's 15% off with promo code GROWNASS at grownasswoman.guide/Coconut.